Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us in today's webinar, ASEAN and IEA webinar, Improving Compliance for Cooling Products in Southeast Asia. Next slide, please. So a brief housekeeping. We want to ensure that all participants to turn off the background noise and also turn off the cell phones. Probably this is more applicable to the panelists, and to turn off the microphone and only unmute it when requested by the moderator later on. And also the same with the video camera. And I think I would like to encourage all participants to actively participate in the discussions. So all of you can chat the questions at any time through the chat box function. And then we would appreciate if you can put the name and also your country or affiliation so that we can address the questions properly. I think that would be all. Next slide, please. So I already welcome you all, and I think for short opening remarks, my name is Zulfikar, and I'm the Senior Officer of RE Department of ASEAN Center for Energy. Next slide, please. I think I would like to begin with explaining what we have in here, which is the ASEAN Energy Cooperation Blueprint, ASEAN Plan of Action for Energy Cooperation, or we also call it APAEC. The APAEC Phase 2, 2021-2025, was endorsed by the ASEAN Ministers on Energy meeting last year, and including in that are 7 program areas. And one of the key program areas is the energy efficiency and conservation. Within that program area, the target of the regional target is to reduce energy intensity by 32% by 2025, and also encourage EENC efforts, especially in transport and industry. And within that program area number 4, we have, I think, 6 outcome-based strategies. And one of the outcome-based strategy is OBS3, which is to strengthen the sustainability of energy efficiency in buildings, or we also usually call it the energy efficiency in buildings. And among the OBS3, we have like several action plans. One of it, which is the key and which is mostly related with our event today, is the Action Plan 3.1, which is develop and disseminate sustainable EE or energy efficiency in buildings and cooling roadmap for ASEAN. And we turn this action plan utilizing our strong collaboration and support by International Energy Agency or AEA. Next slide, please. And together we developed this project or this program called Roadmaps Towards Sustainable and Energy Efficient Buildings and Cooling in ASEAN. And this is done by IEA in collaboration with all ASEAN member states through EENC SSN, the ASEAN Secretariat, and the ASEAN Center for Energy. We received generous support by the Australia government through ASEAN-Australia Development Cooperation Program Phase 2 or AADCP2. So basically what we would like to deliver through this project or program are 2 roadmaps as per the action plan 3.1 of the action plan 3.1 of the EENC program area. The first one will be the ASEAN Sustainable Cooling Roadmap, and the second one will be the ASEAN Energy Efficient Buildings and Construction Roadmap. And how to do that? Of course, we're gonna have a lot of desktop research, case studies, and discussion with experts. But what differentiate our project is that we're gonna have a lot of capacity building and consultative workshops. We plan to have 7 to 8 webinars for capacity building this year. And today's webinar is the first of the series of such a webinar, all within the topics of sustainable cooling and sustainable building. And we're also gonna have a series of stakeholders consultative workshops. We have the first and the second one for building and cooling in the this year's EENC SSN meeting. And through that workshop, we have deep discussions with countries, also with the key stakeholders in building, cooling, and energy efficiency in the region. Next slide, please. So in today's, the first webinar, we are taking the topic of the compliance. I think this is a very important topic. As I mentioned before, within program area of energy efficiency and conservation, we have several OBS or strategies. And in addition to the building one that we have currently, we also have various strategies, including improving the standard and labeling, improving also finance, etc. And I think once the countries have the standard and labelings, they have this minimum energy performance standards or MAPs, they have this system. But it's also important to really leverage all of those standards, all of those labelings, all of those policy and regulatory frameworks into real action and implementation. And to ensure that all of those policies really turn into energy efficiency measures, this compliance will be a very critical component. And this will be related to all other measures in EENC, including, as I mentioned before, standard and labeling, but also including testing, registration system, and others. And for today, we're going to have Melanie Slade from IEA as the moderator, and we're going to have a roster of 4 excellent speakers from various backgrounds and expertise. We're going to have Neha from CLASP, we're going to have Hafiza from Energy Commission Malaysia, we're going to have Rizky from ASEAN Center for Energy, and Madeleine from UNEP. And then they're going to have deep discussions in the compliance, especially for cooling products in Southeast Asia. And then after that, we're going to have Q&A sessions. And right after that, we're going to have a quick closing webinar from me. So without further ado, next slide, please. I would like to invite our moderator for today's webinar, Ms. Melanie Slade, which is the Senior Program Manager of Energy Efficiency and Emerging Economies Program of IEA. Ms. Mel, the screen and time is yours.
Thank you very much, Zulfikar. And thank you, everybody, for the opportunity to be here today. Next slide, please. And the next slide, please. So, as you often would expect from me, I just wanted to set the context for this conversation today. Zulfikar has given us a great introduction to the project itself. So, but why are we doing this, and why are we prioritizing these 2 areas? As Zulfikar said, they're already called out in the ASEAN Plan for Action on Energy Conservation. So there's been a strategic view of what's really important to this region. And just to say that globally, of course, energy efficiency has a huge part to play in meeting our climate goals, as it does in the region. So about 40% of the action that we need to see is in energy efficiency. It's the biggest single element of working towards those goals. Next slide, please. But unfortunately, we're actually finding that progress on energy efficiency is weakening. And we, of course, collectively need to do as much as we can to reverse that trend. And that's one of the purposes behind this project, is to produce actionable, regional specific roadmaps that will help accelerate the rate of energy efficiency improvement and turn this trend around. So I mentioned the climate goals, but there are other really pressing measures, of course, globally at the moment, not least, of course, the damage to our economies that the health crisis has caused. So next slide, please. The good news for energy efficiency is that it's one of the best ways of creating new jobs. It helps us create long-term jobs, good quality local jobs, particularly if we look at energy efficiency in buildings. So if you look at the green bars at the bottom of this chart, you can see that for every $1 million invested, we can look to be creating about 15 jobs. And so this is something that we're wanting to talk to governments about around the world and try and encourage governments to think about energy efficiency at the same time as they're developing their sustainable recovery plans. This is a once in a generation opportunity to really put some emphasis on energy efficiency, put some funding into energy efficiency, and help us, reverse this trend that we've been seeing. So it's a win-win-win situation here. Next slide, please. We've already heard about the roadmaps, so I won't go into them in any detail, but all what I would like to say is, if you're interested in the content, if you're interested in what we have to say today, please join the community of experts and specialists who are helping build these roadmaps. They will only ever be as good as the information we manage to collect from the region. And like I said, the intent is that it's a capacity building process. It's a process where we end up with hopefully not reports that sit on the shelf somewhere, but ones that really help governments take practical action that's regional specific. Next slide, please. Just to explain why we are focusing on compliance in this first webinar. One of the big issues in the region, which I'll come to in a moment, is of course cooling. And we can have the best building codes in the world. We can have to try and develop or stimulate the best thermal performance of buildings. We can have the best appliance standards in the world. But if we don't actually enforce those, if the stakeholders involved in making them work well don't understand their roles, then we won't get effective action. So we can have a paper thing, or we can have something that really works in action. And that's why we're here today, to talk about this particular subject and why it's the top of the list for this process. Next slide, please. There's a huge savings potential, of course, from product efficiency. And as I was just saying, we won't get that saving if we don't actually make sure this compliance process works. Next slide, please. I just wanted to really push home the point about air conditioner ownership in this region. So one thing we can do, as I said, with the buildings roadmap is talk about the thermal performance of buildings. With the cooling roadmap, we'll be talking mainly about the appliances themselves, but of course both things are essential. Air conditioning ownership is relatively modest in emerging economies at the moment, and in the ASEAN region in particular. You can see the biggest country in ASEAN right at the bottom of this chart, Indonesia, still with very, very modest levels of air conditioner ownership. Next slide, please. And this is showing us what we expect to see by 2050, where 2/3 of the world's households have an air conditioner. China, India, and Indonesia will have half of the air conditioners in the world. So massive growth. And if that's not done in a sustainable way, then the stress that will put on energy supply systems will just not be manageable. And we won't be able to manage the carbon emissions that will come from that as well. So it will have energy security issues, it will have affordability issues, as well as climate issues. Next slide, please. I just wanted to take this opportunity to mention one of the things that countries can do to club together to work on improving the efficiency and the compliance of their products. We'd like to just call your attention to the SEED initiative, the Super Efficient Appliances and Deployment Initiative, which has been around for more than 10 years now. The UK government, under the leadership that they're showing through COP26, have kicked off a call to action to try and ask governments to come together with them to increase ambition on appliance efficiency. And we'd like to take this opportunity just to point that out and to ask other governments around the table, people who are listening today, to consider joining the initiative. One of the main products here is air conditioners. So it's very, very relevant to this initiative. Another one is, of course, lighting. And of course, that features highly in the buildings roadmap as well. Next slide, please. Where this really can help influence compliance is in bringing countries together to set similar performance requirements. Also to connect minimum energy performance standards with labels, with high efficiency performance standards, which attract incentives. So things like endorsement labels, public procurement programs. The idea is to have a ladder that connects all of these steps so that governments around the world choose the level that suits them best, but they're all tracking towards a much more ambitious goal. And the benefit of having less steps is that it's easier for compliance. Manufacturers can manufacture products, test them, and sell them in most of the world. This helps industry, of course. It reduces costs because they don't have to do different things for different regions, and it helps governments because there are less there's less diversity in the sense, and it's more easy to make sure that compliance is happening. Governments can share information on compliance. And we're going to hear that from some of our speakers later on. And just one last slide, please. This is just showing the members of the partnership, the seed partnership at the moment. As I said, we only have Indonesia in this region as a current member, and we'd like to, of course, see the other 9 members of ASEAN join and benefit from this collaborative effort that will help support their standards and labelling programs over the years. Now, I'm going to stop there. That was just to set the scene as to why all of this is so important. And now we're going to move on to our expert presentations. We're going to do the presentations all together and come to questions at the end because we'd like to try and get a discussion going amongst the panelists. If you have questions, as Zulfikar said, please type them in the chat and we'll get to them if we can. We'll try and address as many of them as we can. But if you have pointers for the roadmaps, please just put them in the chat. You can make comments. You don't have to just ask questions. And we'll use everything that we get from these events to try and, like I say, enrich the roadmaps. So let's move on now to our first panelist, please. And we're going to go to Neha from CLASP. Neha's the India Program Manager, but she has a huge amount of experience in this region too. And she's going to talk to us about the work that CLASP have been doing in compliance. Neha, thank you very much, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Melanie. Hi, everyone. Next slide, please. Yeah, today I will be talking about some of the work that we have been doing in the Southeast Asia region to improve compliance for cooling products in basically in the region. So moving on to the next slide, please. Before I get into some of the specific projects that we have been doing, I would like to re-emphasize what Melanie just said, that impact of policy non-compliance, particularly for cooling appliances, will have disastrous consequences in terms of the climate change mitigation, as well as the energy and GHG savings that we can have from energy efficiency policies. If we look at some of the numbers that have been calculated, that then even with minimal non-compliances can result in more than $11 billion of excess electricity costs to the consumers. And if we look at higher rates of non-compliance just for cooling appliances, then it can result in over 120 billion electricity costs increase only for the year 2026. So these are the kind of impacts that we can have by non-compliances. And that is why it is really important to focus on compliance for all the products. But to start with, we did some work in the region for cooling appliances. Next slide, please. So this is a list of some of the projects that we have been doing in the region to support national compliance support for ACs as well as regional support. As you can see on the map, we are currently working with the Vietnam to support market surveillance activities, and we concluded some of our projects in Cambodia, Laos PDR, Philippines, and Indonesia. And we also, at the regional level, we developed voluntary market surveillance guidelines for ASEAN member states. These are available on our website. We'll be sharing the presentation at the end of the session so that you can click on the link and you can access the presentations, access the guidelines. And then we also conducted round-robin testing exercise in Vietnam to build regional testing capacity for air conditioners. The report is also available in public domain. Next slide, please. Yeah, so I'll talk briefly about ASEAN market surveillance guidelines that we developed. So these guidelines outline best practices for monitoring and identifying non-compliant air conditioners. And these are practical resources for the governments and compliance authorities. And these are useful at every step of the compliance program. So either when a country is designing and implementing a national market surveillance program, or when they are revising and strengthening existing programs, at all stages, the guidelines will be useful, and these are voluntary at this stage. And these cover, as you can see in the slides, these cover all the aspects. So the first aspect is establishing market surveillance programs. So this includes basically development of legal framework, how to establish some of the basic requirements before a market surveillance it comes into practice. The second step is conducting actual market surveillance while going to the store or for online appliance or for the products sold online. So it lays out some of the steps that one should take while conducting this step. And third step is conducting verification testing. As we all know that the budget for compliance as well as policies is limited. So instead of going for random testing or random market surveillance, the guidelines tell you some of the steps that one should take for the targeted market surveillance and verification testing. And it lays out all the steps, basically how to select the products, how to have certain criteria, how to pick them up, how to dispose them, how to conduct testing. And then it also tells you some of the, once you encounter non-compliance, then what are some of the steps that one can take for ensuring enforcement. And these of course depend on the national as well as regional legislation as well. And the last step that the guidelines talk about is the regional collaboration, which is the most important one, because if countries are doing some of this, are taking some of the actions to improve their compliance, if they can share these resources and this information within the region, then we can have the higher level of compliance at the cost-effective rates. So that step is the most important one for the region, because here several countries are sharing some of the resources as well as the products are also commonly exchanged. Next slide, please. So learning from, taking some of the learnings from the ASEAN market surveillance guidelines, we are working with our local partner, Ecology and Environmental Institute in Vietnam, and in close collaboration with the Ministry of Industry and Trade for supporting them in the market surveillance pilot project. The project started in January 2020, and some of the things that we are trying to do under this project are that we are, first of all, we are trying to assess what are the gaps in the existing framework, whether it's legal or institutional, for compliance. And then we are developing recommendations for strengthening some of those gaps. At the same time, we are also developing a strategy for identification of products at high risk of non-compliance. So like I said, that you can't test all the products, you can't survey all the products. So the strategy should involve targeted approach, which is what we are focusing on. I will be talking a little bit more about some of the details of this project on the next in some of the next slides that I have. So can we move on to the next slide, please? Yes. So first activity, which is the most important one that we are conducting as part of this project, is that we are first of all trying to identify high risk products. We have developed certain criteria based approach to identify the products for testing. And this approach includes the products which had a history of non-compliance, products which are at the edges of the rating band, some products which are barely complying with, some products which are super efficient but are very available at very lower cost. So there are different criteria, and some of the products which are identified from online as well as in-store market surveillance, those products are targeted for conducting further investigation. The second step is online market monitoring. So as we all know that the products that are sold online, the number of products is increasing by the day, and therefore it is very important to test the effectiveness of online market monitoring. Even though currently the regulation does not make it mandatory, but then if we assess the current levels and if we can recommend some of the steps and the guidance, it will be very useful. So that is another thing that we are trying to do as part of this project. Third step is retailer training. We know that retailers are the first point of contact between consumers as well as the product, and they have a great role and important role in influencing consumers' purchase decision making. So we are trying to give training to retailers so as to increase and develop their understanding towards efficient products, so that they can help in promoting consumer awareness as well as compliance. The fourth step is in-store label inspections, which is an approach which is part of most of the labeling programs, but often understated. So in this approach, we are assessing, we are also doing a pilot activity where we are assessing compliance with the labeling regulations via in-store inspections. And out of all these approaches that we have identified 13 room air conditioners through these activities, which will be testing for which we will be testing by way of verification testing, and then we will be supporting the government in ensuring some of the enforcement related actions. Next slide, please. So as part of this, these different activities, we have developed certain resources, tools, guidelines, which can be used by Vietnam as well as other countries for identifying some of these non-compliant products. So we have developed this high-risk criteria tool, which basically looks into different aspects, such as whether a product just meets MEPS level, whether it has very high efficiency levels and is available at a very cheaper cost, whether it has a history of non-compliance. So basically taking into different considerations as well as, and then ranking the product on the basis of that, it helps us select the products which are at the highest risk and then taking them for the next stage, which is either verification testing or in-store inspection. So as to using some of these criteria based approaches helps us utilizing and maximizing our resources very, very effectively. Next slide, please. Another step that I spoke about was conducting different online checks. So we have some of the evidences from Australia, which says that an online label leads 20% of consumers to purchase more efficient products. Currently, there are no such requirements for online labeling, but in different countries, but more and more countries are starting to require mandatory display of online labels. So CLASP has conducted recent studies in Europe as well, which indicate that there is a need for clear rules on how and where the label must be displayed, and penalties for missing the label should be very, very clearly available. And the retailers must also understand how to comply with online labeling requirements. So we have also developed a guidance and to help advise what to look for when conducting these online checks. Next slide, please. And the last but the most important thing is the product registry. So these are really very valuable component to energy efficiency program. It is the first compliance gateway and market surveillance reference for efficiency program because this is the interface that consumer as well as market surveillance authorities can check to ensure whether the products that are registered with the government are actually complying with the values, with the labels that are there in the market or not. It can very well support market surveillance and enforcement activities through various at each of the stage. So the first is my online market surveillance. So one can easily compare the information that is available online against the information which is in the product registry, basically the entire set of registered products. Similarly, for in-store compliance is also the staff that and the inspectors that are carrying out inspection, they can match whether the labels that are applied on the product are actually matching with the ones that are registered. And then since it has a list of all the products, it can also help in identifying high-risk products for verification testing, as well as communicating market surveillance findings and enforcement notifications. So these are some of the things that I wanted to showcase. And the last thing is a regional registry, which is very, very important as it provides regional market intelligence, and neighboring countries can also learn from each other by not, even though somebody is at a more advanced stages and somebody is at less advanced stages, but they can share the information with each other and all the countries can benefit from such information. So with all of this, what I'm trying to say is that we've supported some of the aspects at the regional level, and then we've also implemented and tried to do some of the activities using those resources at the national level, which I think is a practical example and demonstration. And I think if some of these tools are used by different countries or by the region, it will very well help in at least improving the compliance, or if not improving the compliance, but at least in establishing the institutional mechanism which is required for having an effective compliance mechanism. So that's all I had. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Neha. I'd just like to add to what Neha's just said. This approach, which is very methodical, is built on an approach that has been developing over the last 30 years in various parts of the world, where the kind of, I would say that it represents best practice. It represents the current state of our knowledge across the world about how compliance works, how to do it more effectively, how to acknowledge that most governments don't have many resources to put into this, so the more it can be organized and automated, and these processes for checking market data using digital tools, these processes for identifying the high risk cases using digital tools, all of that is really best practice, and it's what we would hope that governments around the world will look to and collaborate on in the next stages of development. So thank you so much, Neha, for fantastic to kind of bring us up to date on that. Congratulations for the work. It's great. So now we're going to move on to a presentation from the region, from Hafiza, who's from the Energy Commission of Malaysia, and she's going to talk to us about their current initiatives on cooling products. Hafiza?
Thank you, Melanie. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Hafiza from the Energy Commission of Malaysia. So today I will talk about the Malaysia's initiative for cooling products, what we have done so far. Next, please. I'll be talking about cooling initiative in Malaysia and also the way forward, what we intend to do in the next 5 years. Next. Next slide, please. This is previous one, please. This is the energy efficiency policy and regulatory instrument that Malaysia has right now. We have the National Energy Efficiency Action Plan, or in short, NEEAP. And we have come up with the efficient management for electrical energy regulation in 2008, particularly to the bigger installation in Malaysia to obey with the efficient management policy. We have the Electricity Regulation 1994 amendment in 2013, particularly for the maps and labeling for electrical products. We have the Code of Practice, what we call the MS 1525, for the non-residential building, and also the current one we have the Building Energy Labeling Program. Next, please. Next, please. This is the annual energy consumption and savings in 2019 for 6 electrical appliances that requires maps. So from this chart, you see the highest consumption is by the air conditioners. That is why we have to put a very high attention to these air conditioners. For that, next please. For that, Energy Commission has come up with the Maps and Labeling Program. Next slide, please. For the 9 appliances, and And for air conditioners, we have revised it twice. And all of these products must label with the energy label so that the consumer know what is the rating for that appliances before they can buy it in the shop, and it will give the estimation how much the savings that they could get from the appliances. This is the Malaysian standard that I tell you just now, the MS 1525 Code of Practice on Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy for Non-Residential Buildings. Next slide, please. This is one of the instruments to the developer, because this one has become one of the compliance element to the building constructions. It has created awareness to the building developer to build energy efficient building. It's not only on the cooling part, but all elements like passive lighting, passive design and everything. Next, please. Under the efficient management of electrical energy regulation Act 2008, from this chart, you see the compliance rate from 2018 has increased in 2019 from 67% to 71%. So from there, we found that most of the popular improvement activities are in the air conditioning system, which is telling you that when you improve the air conditioning system, meaning the cooling elements in your premises or in your factory, it will give a lot of savings. Not to forget others like compressor system, fan system, variable speed drive, efficient lighting, or high efficient motors. It also will give you some savings. Next, please. The latest program that we have is the BI. We call it BEI labeling. Is the labeling for the buildings. Okay, but for now we are targeting the government buildings only. It aims to encourage government staff to improve the energy intensity for their buildings. Energy Commission is the implementing agency for these activities, and it provides information on the energy performance of a building. So if you can see on the label, it has the stars. So if your buildings rated at 5-star, your BI should be ranges below than 100, and it will say that your building is the most efficient. It goes to the 1-star. So we hope that after 1 year, when we start to label the building owners, I mean the building operators, has to comply with the regulations and also try to improve their ratings. Next, please. So after 5 years of implementation in 2023, we hope that we can save around 520 gigawatt hour, around 100 million ringgit of electricity bills, and 361 ton of CO2 equivalent. And each building is expected to improve the star rating to at least 1 star above current rating within 3 to 5 years. Next, please. Under the new National Energy Efficiency Action Plan, this is all the activities that we have to undergo, and the plan started in 2016, and we hope to see the outcome in 2025. So we will continue to promote the 5-star rated appliances, especially the air conditioners, and we will improve the minimum energy performance standards for those appliances. For industry, we have come up with the energy audits and energy management program and promotion of cogeneration. In buildings, we come up with the energy audits also, and also the energy efficient building design. So we will continue this up until 2025 to achieve what we have targeted. Next, please. So this is the target from what we have planned, and the business as usual. If you can see, if you are maintaining the business as usual in the blue line, to compare with the plan, we could save around 52,000 gigawatt hour. So as for now, our status is exactly on track. So we hope to achieve our savings when we reach 2025. So we hope that this program will go on and will success in 2025. Next, please. On the incentive instrument, we come up with the energy audit grant for the industries. To those who want to do improvement, so they can opt for to apply for the energy audit grant from us, and they can after the energy audit has been implemented, they have to do the improvement in order to get the money. In January 2021, we have launched what we call the SAFE 2.0 program. We have this is the second program. The similar ones we have done in 2011, where we give the government gave 200 ringgit voucher for energy efficient home appliances. For now, we give the vouchers to air conditioners and the refrigerators. This is really a good program where a lot of people, especially we open this for the domestic, and a lot of people are very eager to get these vouchers. Apart from it, we also have the tax exemption program, where if you are doing the improvement, you can also opt for that. If you are coming from the industry, if you are doing the improvement in your factory, you can also get tax exemption. Yes, please. So the way forward, we would like to increase the compliance rate for cooling products. So that's why we are in the discussion to add bigger capacity to comply with NEEAP. In the earlier slide, I show you now the air conditioners that have to follow the minimum energy performance standard is only up to 25,000 BTU per hour, around 7.1 kilowatts. So we are intend to go to bigger capacity, maybe up to 14 or 20 kilowatts. We will revise the current rating for cooling products, increase NEEAP especially, and also increase the rating so that people will get more saving out of that program. We will continue the awareness campaign, and we will also do the market surveillance to see the compliance rate in the market. So we will buy the product from the market, we do the testing, and we have to make sure that all the products in the market are compliant to the regulation. Next, please. Okay, so that's all from me. If anything, you can email me at hafiza@lst.gov.my. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hafiza. Really, very good to emphasize the strategic approach that you take and explain that to everybody. Really interested to see how this all builds together into your plan. And of course, like the roadmaps we're doing, how we have the buildings and the building envelope and also the appliances, and you have programs specifically for them. I was also really pleased to see you talking about incentives, because we spend an awful lot of these conversations talking about the minimum energy performance standards. We talk a bit about labels. I don't think we talk enough about incentivizing the top end of the market. So thank you so much for that. That's really helpful. We're going to move on to Rizky now, who from the ASEAN Centre for Energy, to talk about integration of energy efficiency into the ASEAN Mutual Recognition Arrangement, which is, of course, another really important initiative to ensure compliance. So thank you very much, Rizky. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Melanie, for the introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. And today I'm going to share with you the regional initiative to integrate the energy efficiency into the ASEAN Mutual Recognition Arrangement, which will support the compliance of the cooling products. Next slide, please. As has been introduced by Dr. Zulfikar, that you may already aware that we have what we call the ASEAN Plan of Action for Energy Cooperation, or APAEC, which basically serve as a blueprint and guiding documents for the ASEAN regional energy cooperation. And the APAEC Phase 2 for the period of 2021 to 2025, which will focusing on the accelerating energy transition as well as the strengthening energy resilience. This means that energy efficiency and conservation will take an extensive role in achieving this target. Next slide, please. And speaking about the compliance of the cooling products under the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Program, it is part under the outcome-based strategies on the harmonization of energy efficiency standard and labeling, where the Mutual Recognition Arrangement, or the MRA, is one of the priorities and action items, both in the APAEC Phase 1 and also the APAEC Phase 2. Next slide, please. And the directions and the regional cooperation on the mutual recognition arrangement has been well captured for the past few years by the ASEAN ministers. And starting with the 34th ASEAN Ministers on Energy meeting, which has endorsed the regional policy roadmap for maps for AC, where the MRA is included as one of the main elements of the roadmap. And the initiatives also continued with the cross-sectoral collaboration between energy efficiency and standards and conformance working group. And in 2019, the 37th AMEM has endorsed the guidelines for the integration of energy efficiency into the ASEAN Electrical and Electronic Equipment MRA platform. Next slide, please. The ASEAN-IEA MRA was signed by the ASEAN trade ministers in 2002, which basically aiming to facilitate the free flow of goods under the ASEAN economic community by eliminating the technical barriers to trade, where in some cases that the importer or the manufacturer are required to test their product upon the arrival in the country, and they are not allowed to release or to sold their product into the market without showing the proof of compliance to the national standards. And this MRA would allow the countries to accept the conformity assessment results from the listed testing laboratory or certification bodies in the source country to verify the compliance of the product. So it could further avoid the duplication of testing and certification, which subsequently could further reduce the cost of testing as well as the time to market, while also ensuring that the quality and also the performance of the product are also in line with the national standards. And the ASEAN-IEA MRA has three essential requirements, where the MRA for safety standard has been established, while the remaining two elements, the electronic compatibility or EMC and environment, which is include the energy efficiency, is expected to follow. Next slide, please. And to facilitate the integration of the energy efficiency elements in the ASEAN-IEA MRA, guidelines was published, which provided the necessary steps and also actions for the member states as well as the harmonized process, as well as documentation that can be pursued by the member states. Next slide, please. And we have the next 2 slides, please. Next one. Yeah, so basically to further integrate the energy efficiency into the ASEAN MRA framework, there are a few key action steps that are recommended under the guidelines that the countries could further undertake. The first one is, as some countries are not yet have some legal provision on the related to the MRA, then it is required. Back one slide. Sorry, it is required for the countries to have a legal provision that recognize the assessment report from the listed laboratory under the ASEAN-IEA MRA. And can we go to the slides number 7? And second, to maintain the quality of the listed testing laboratory and also certification body, a responsible agency that specifically for the energy efficiency is needed, while they are also going to be responsible to further nominate the qualified laboratory into the mutual recognition arrangement framework. And the third one is the importance of dissemination of information to the key stakeholders. So an information booklet or a clear and transparent information could be published, which includes all of the important elements such as the energy efficiency law, the key or mandatory standards, and to also accommodate the other countries' manufacturers. So it should be in English language. And last but not least is to also comply with the harmonized process of the mutual recognition arrangement, which including the designation, where the designated bodies should ensure that the testing laboratory and also the certification body are fulfilling the minimum requirements and standards. And then the testing laboratory and also certification body could further be nominated to the ASEAN-IEA MRA platform, where the JSC EEE, the Joint Sector Committee of EEE, will make an assessment and to decide whether it could be further listed under the framework. And then the last process is the once it's approved, it will be listed under this framework. Next slide, please. So this is my last slide. So just to emphasize that this initiative will not only further support the compliance of cooling products, but it's also further impacted the broader vision of the ASEAN economic community towards a free flow of goods in a true single market and also production base. So the end game or the aim of this is to have one standard, one test which could be accepted for all countries. And that's all from my side. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rizky. This is such a tremendously important element of making our appliance standards and labelling programs work well, that it's kind of often overlooked and not understood. It's a bit techie for some people, but it's absolutely essential as a bedrock for making these programs work well. So thank you for introducing it, but also, you know, again, congratulations on the work, because it needs to be done. It will help make sure that programs are much more effective, and it will help, you know, share resources across the region. So hugely important in terms of having effective programs. And thank you so much for introducing it to us. Now we're going to go on to our last formal presentation to Madeleine, who is part of the United for Efficiency team at UNEP. And she's going to talk about the role that energy efficiency policies, product registration systems can help with compliance. So thank you very much for joining us, Madeleine. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Melanie. Can you please directly go to the next slide? Yeah, so as Melanie said, today I will be talking you through how product registration systems can actually help with the compliance of energy efficiency policies. But before I do that, I just quickly wanted to mention actually who we are, so you know a bit of the background of it. So I'm working at an initiative that is called U4E, United for Efficiency, and what we're doing, we're working basically under the umbrella of UNEP, what is the United Nations Environment Program. And what we do, we help developing countries and emerging economies to leapfrog their market to energy efficient lighting appliances and equipment. And we had been around for a while now. We had been launched in 2014, and we are essentially contributing to the SDG 7.3, which is doubling the global rate of improvement in energy efficiency by 2030. And in the next slide, I would like to show you on which products we are actually focusing on. So we're having 5 core products that also other initiatives have, like for example, the initiative that had been presented by Melanie in the beginning. So we are essentially focusing on those key 5 products because they're very large energy consuming products. So essentially, actually over half of the world's energy is consumed by those 5 products. And so what we focus on are 2 cooling products, that is room air conditioners and residential refrigerators, lighting, as well as motors and distribution transformers. But let me now move to my actual topic, the product registration systems. In the next slide, please. So to best explain you actually what a product registration system is, it's best to explain you how it works. So in a country with the product registration system, a manufacturer that wants to sell the product they manufactured, or an importer that wants to sell the product on the market, what they have to do, they have to go through a process, through a product registration process. And that process starts with the testing of the product. So the product has to be tested by an independent body, a test laboratory, or a conformity assessment body that select a sample of the product and that really tests actually what the product can, what are its technical specifications. And that with that certificate of the test laboratory, the application is then done by the manufacturer or by the importer in the product registration system. So ideally they upload that. There are some product registration systems that are paper-based, but most of it is really actually conducted online. And then, so when the application is done, the energy regulator of the country assesses then that regulation with the help of the test certificate that had been uploaded. And if it complies then with the regulations that are in place in the country, approval or access to the market is granted. And the opposite as well, of course. So if it doesn't comply, the access to the market is not granted. So as a result of that process, only compliant products are circulating within the market of a country having a product registration system in place. And as you can see at the bottom here, there are several types of product registration systems. So there can be a standalone system of just one particular country, but there can be also a system of several countries together. And I will come to that in a moment. And in the next slide, I would like to show you what are actually the benefits of a product registration system. So there's on the one hand the benefit of what I just explained. The products are monitored. So the regulator has really a say on the market, means that compliance ensured with national policies, for example, on energy efficiency of cooling products. But it has also other benefits. So it creates a database with product information, and what we often see in countries is actually when governments want to implement a new regulation, it's sometimes quite challenging because they don't really know what's actually on the market. So they don't really know, for example, where to set exactly the standards. And with that product registration system, you see what is in the market. You have the exact information, what is circulating. So the country can really implement effective standards to the market or to the country. And then there are also other benefits. I won't name them all, but for example, it can help for tracking the environmental impact, which is particularly helpful in terms of reporting to NDCs. Then if consumers are granted access, it can help them to encourage and to choose energy efficient products, foster economic development, and so on. And in the next slide, I would actually like to show you what we do. So our approach is twofold. We are working, on the one hand, we are working on a regional system. That regional system is being developed in cooperation with the ASEAN Center for Energy, with ACE. And I will come to that with more explanation in a moment, but we have recently launched actually that product registration database in early this month during the EEC SSM meeting. And then what we do as well, so that's a regional approach. And then what we do as well, we really develop a practical tool for countries, for national countries at the national level that don't have a product registration system in place. And what products are that are at the moment included in both systems that are on the one hand the cooling products, that is refrigerators and air conditioners, as well as lighting, but it can be expanded to other products as well if countries or regions are interested. So let me show you in the next slide how actually the regional database works. So that's the regional database that has been developed together with the ASEAN Center for Energy and in cooperation with the IEC. And that's a database that we have launched recently at the EEC SSM. So how that works, it's basically setting up a regional database, meaning that it's taking information from the national system, from the national product registration systems that are in place, and that data is transferred via something that is called API, that's just software details. It's an application programming interface, or what it is actually basically a software that allows apps to talk to each other. So with that, the information from the national product registration systems that are in place are transferred to the regional database, and that is a regional common system where all of the countries have access to, only the regulators, of course, because it's very confident information in it. And that is a system that is being managed by ACE, so at the regional level. And in the next slide, I would actually like to show you with an example how that works. So let me show you with a compliance example how the database actually works. So here you see a screenshot of the product registration database that is now dummy data actually, because it's not yet connected to the systems. But once it is connected to the national systems, what it will show is really the data that comes from the countries. So as I just explained, the ASEAN database is consisted of data that comes from the countries, from the ASEAN region. And in the next slide, I would like to show you the example. What happens if, for example, in Thailand, there's a new product aiming to access the market. So let's say, for example, there is a manufacturer of an air conditioner that wants to access the market. What is happening in Thailand in that case is that the manufacturer will apply to the national system of Thailand, and then the regulator sees that the product is actually not compliant with the national maps in place, and that's just really an example. So what happens now with that information? Next slide, please. So that information that Thailand has revoked the access of the market of that air conditioner will be then transferred to the regional database. And you can see here, there will be a button in red coming up and notifying the other ASEAN member states that there's a product in Thailand that is being revoked. And next slide, please. And then all of the other countries, they will get that information to see the product, the air conditioner that the manufacturer wanted to access to the market or wanted to sell in the market is being revoked in Thailand. And why that is important, what's the benefit of that is actually that other countries with that information then might want to adjust their regulation to, for example, serve not as a dumping ground for low energy efficient products in place. But it has, of course, also other benefits to see what is circulating in the neighboring markets. For example, that database can facilitate also the mutual recognition agreements that have been mentioned by Rizky just in the presentation before. Then the next slide, please, which is my last slide. So here I would like to mention, if you now got interested, your country got interested into implementing a product registration system, but you don't really know how to get it and you don't have one yet in place. So what we have is really for implementation in your country available. That's on the one hand, the prototype, meaning that's the national product registration system that you can implement for your country. And the benefit of that is it's really open source, so it's for free. It can work with low internet connections and low data requests. It can be flexible, applied to different servers. And really you can individualize that system as well to according to what you want, because it's built in a modular structure. And then if you're a region who wants to implement something similar to what is currently implemented in Southeast Asia, that system is also available, and that can be also specialized according to your requirements and to what you want. And that is all available on our website. And just to add to that, what I wanted to mention as well, so if you're not that familiar yet with product registration systems, because I understand to many people it's really a new topic, we have a range of guidance notes as well that explain a bit more in detail what actually a product registration system is, what are the benefits, how it's being implemented, what considerations to take. If you're on the one hand a really professional user already, we have also the technical specifications to those two systems available. So thank you for listening, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you so much, Madeleine. As I said, to response to the other presentations, for me, somebody who's been involved in this area for decades, it's just absolutely fantastic to see all of this coming together in one place, using best practice, building on previous experience. It's just, you know, it really is, you know, a flagship collaboration for a region, and so fantastic to see it. I have so many questions, and we don't have that much time, that I'm just going to probably go through a few of them, and maybe we can share some of the others offline. So yes, where to start? Neha, CLASP has been kind of leading a lot of the compliance work. I remember when your first guideline was published. It's got to be eight years or so now ago. I can't remember exactly, but I remember the launch of it very clearly. What sort of response have you got to that? How have things developed, do you think, in the last sort of, I don't know, 5 to 8 years, where collaboration and compliance has become much more of a current topic?
Yeah, so basically when we developed the guidelines, you know, we thought that if we could have the regional one, it will benefit all the countries. but we've been updating some of the stuff in line with the best practices. So I think it is still useful, and now we are also testing it for with our study in Vietnam. So we feel that if some of the countries can use it, and if the region can use it for their compliance efforts, and can encourage countries to refer to them who are either designing or revising their compliance programs, I think it will be very, very helpful as a starting point, even if some of the lessons could be used and adopted by the countries.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think that's a great point. You know, having a global guideline is a good start, then testing a regional one, then testing the country one, and then you can perhaps go around that loop again and work out what can be commonly shared and what needs to be tailored. So yeah, very interesting. Of course, you know, this subject is so important to manufacturers, to the producers of products, that good engagement with them on these issues, I think, is really important. And I know you've been doing that as well. I'll stop there for the moment and go around everybody at least once. Hafiza, you led, I think, the technical working group on the registration systems working with United for Efficiency. And Malaysia has its own registration system. Can you tell people how you can work between your national system and this new regional system? How does it work? Will you give up your national system, or will you? How will you do your next step?
Thank you, Mel, for the question. Okay, for our registration system is part of the regulations. So we have done this since, I think, since our establishment of our government. So for this regional product registration system, we will link up the system so that we will, correct me if I'm wrong, Madeleine. So through the API, we will send the data that we have, the product registration system in our system, the data that requires for the regional system, we will send it through the API to the regional database. So it may be not real-time sharing, but the API will download for our system and connect it to the regional system. Maybe what about it, Madeleine? Maybe once a week or once a month, like that. So whatever that has been in Malaysia will be able to be listed in the regional system by later it will transfer to the ASEAN Center for Energy as the I think the organizer for it. So we will continue our project registration system, and we will share the data with the regional database.
Great, that's really interesting and very important, because everybody's of course at a different stage of development. Some people have had registration systems for many years, like you. And other people have none at all. Other people were halfway through building them. So I was just interested to see how this can all come together. So thank you for that. That's really useful to know. And I know we're talking about Southeast Asia, but the lessons here will be tremendously valuable to other regions. And that point, I think, is important to people in particular. Rizky, one of the things that we often don't talk about perhaps enough is standards and labelling systems or regulations can actually interfere with international trade, you know, and so your work on mutual recognition agreements, your work to make sure that things are, you know, compliant with WTO, hugely important. So if a manufacturer says you haven't approved my product quickly enough, you're harming my business, how would you respond to that? What would you do?
Yeah, thank you so much, Melanie. So yeah, I think that's something that one of the main challenges itself on this item. So the delay or the obstacles when they are registering to register their product into some countries. So they may some obstacles, for instance, that there's like, as I mentioned earlier, that some countries are required to have like a retesting and their products, and it may cause further delay also, since it's also may have a burden for the local testing laboratory. So, and this MRA as well as could be one of the items that could further pursue, because like the manufacturer could further test their products beforehand, before they're coming into the before they are registering to the country. So it may and the country could also directly accept the test report, so it may not require more time to retesting and so on and so forth. So they could further reduce their costs. They're also expedite the time to market of the product. So I think this kind of arrangement could further help the beneficial also for the manufacturers. Well, especially they can save much time and cost, where it could also further help them to strategize as well as to improve or to innovate their product to have a more and more comply as well as more efficient products. So, and also this MRA also are required to have the adopt or harmonize the standards into the global standards such as ISO and so on and so forth. So, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, really important points to make, because of course the World Trade Organization's Technical Barriers to Trade Committee are always looking carefully at environmental regulations to make sure that they're not introducing non-tariff trade barriers and things like that. So we need to be very conscious of that that issue. Madeleine, your presentation on registration systems shows extremely clearly how they can actually be an incredibly important tool to governments in terms of data collection. And you talked about how governments don't necessarily know what's on their markets, and you know that can mean that ambition is not as high as it could be, because they don't realise that markets are transforming as quickly as they can be. Have you got any ideas about how some of those trigger points for, say, stepping up a MEPS or regrading a label, have you got any thoughts about how they could be, at least in part, automated through your registration systems and the data that they're collecting?
Thank you for the question, Melanie. I think let me take the answer again twofold according to what we're doing. So there's, on the one hand, let me refer to the regional product registration system that we are doing. So as Hafiza explained before, there is the data from the national systems being transferred to the regional database. And just to reiterate, it's correct to say that the national systems, they will stay in place how they are, so they're not being touched, and the data is really transferred through APIs. But how that is triggered, how that is basically how a country is motivated to implement higher standards is, let me maybe refer it back to the example that has been shared earlier. So for example, with a country having a MEPS regulation in place, other countries see that high efficient products are circulating in their own market. And when member countries actually see that there's one country that has higher efficient MEPS in place, those products that are lower efficient might then go to other markets that don't have the higher efficient MEPS in place. And in order not to serve as a dumping ground, then because they don't have that high MEPS in place, these countries are motivated to implement then the maps because they just don't want to serve as a dumping ground. And in terms of national product registration system, so what a national product registration system does, it serves basically the same, let's say the same main benefit of tracking the product, the data of the efficient products, or the data of all of the products in the countries. And when governments assess their regulation, they can see actually are the maps that are in place effective or not. There are many maps as well in place that are just at a too low level, so they can see, they can easily build graphs of what are actually the products on the market and where the maps set. And if those are too low, countries can easily go a step up higher and set standards at the level where it's really effective. I hope that answered your question.
I think that's a really important point, and one of the things that we're trying to demonstrate with all of this work that's going on around the world is that in many cases there are products out there in similar markets that are a step more efficient. They don't have to cost more, so the motivation hopefully will be there to make those transitions. So thanks for that. On the point, Neha, of stimulating ambition, you have a lot of experience on how the data that is basically collected through registration systems can then be used for consumer information. And of course, our two best examples of how that's been driven are through China and India, and a lot of their experiences, of course, very relevant to this region. So can you just make the step for people listening between the registration system, the QR code, and then the kind of consumer information and what that can do to drive ambition in markets? Would you give us a couple of minutes on that?
Yeah, thanks for that question. It's a very important question. So as I said, product registration systems are very important and integral tool in ensuring compliances. These can be linked with the mobile applications with the QR codes and help improving both communication, awareness, and thereby improving compliances. Because if people are more aware about some of these mechanisms, about some of the things that are there, then they can use things like mobile app, QR codes to report non-compliances. And for the regional level, I think even if the countries have their own product databases, it can be used to support compliance, monitoring, and policy development. And it can be linked with the U4E's product registration database through APIs, so that countries can share information and market intelligence with each other. This will help them collectively identify some of the non-compliances, which are difficult to identify because all the countries are at different stages in terms of regulation as well as in terms of advancements. So that's what I wanted to share on that.
Thank you. That's really important, and I think something you've discovered and U4E have discovered too. Shining a light on these things, having such transparent systems, having them well promoted and very visible, I think is really going to help us scale up and change ambition, because it used to be the case that governments didn't have as much information to hand, and it was difficult for them to make these decisions. And sometimes they were being challenged when they were trying to step up their ambitions. With these much more transparent processes, I think this is going to really help us. So thanks for that. To Ace and to Emily, who put this panel together, thank you so much for making these links through the registration systems, the compliance processes, the MRA, through Hafiza's experience in Malaysia. I think it's a tremendously important collection of experience, and we will try and distill as much as possible for the roadmaps, so that we can share that experience. And I know that you will continue to do so through your work. So thank you so much for that, and for the collaboration that everybody's showing here. We'd like to take a group photo, if we may. So if you could keep your cameras on just for a moment before we hand over to Zulfikar for the closing remarks. So
okay, thank you very much. So I think
somebody can count us now.
Yeah, I'm just going to quickly ask our ICT to do the screenshot on my account.
Okay.
So yeah, 1, 2, 3, and probably another one. 1, 2, 3. Thank you very much. You might close the session and before.
Okay. Thank you all. Been a great discussion.
Great. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much, Mel, and the 4 speakers for sharing the insightful informations to all the stakeholders of energy efficiency, especially cooling in the whole Southeast Asia. I think we have learned a lot, and what really struck to me is that what is the importance of this information sharing platform mechanisms, which has been shown by the studies from CLASP about market surveillance, voluntary market surveillance even, what has been shared by our colleagues from NEEAP about the product registration system, and also being strengthened by the case from Malaysia as shared by Hafiza. And what we expect and what we hope to have in the region is that to have this whole energy efficiency system, including the standard labeling and the compliance system, into what we call the mutual agreement in the regional level. And I think that will give strengthening the system as well, like as discussed in depth by our speakers, like the system in one country can complement the system in other, and it can save the cost, it can save the learning curve, and it can also give a more efficient energy efficient system in the whole region. So I think that will be what we are going to do in the project, as mentioned before. But probably I would like to give a quick shout out to the next slide, please. Yeah, so actually this is also part of our projects in developing the roadmap for sustainable building and cooling in the region. So one of it is we are going to have a survey, and we would like to call all of our audiences to do the survey for the roadmap for energy efficient buildings and construction in ASEAN. Currently, our colleague is sending the link for the survey to the chat box. I would like press it if you can click it and do the quick survey for us. And overall, today's discussion has been great. We learned a lot about compliance, and we will definitely take the input information we got today as part of development for our roadmap, especially for cooling. And we also would like to invite all of the audiences who has information, who has study or has cases that you think would be very important for us to know. You might reach us in ASEAN Center for Energy or reach us through IEA, so that we can enrich our study with what you have been done in the region. I think for the last point, I would like to say that I would like to remind that this is just the first series of webinar that we have in the topic of sustainable cooling and also energy efficient buildings. And we're going to have more and more webinars. So please stay tuned to ASEAN Center for Energy website as well as IEA, in which we're going to announce the next webinars within the topics of buildings and cooling. So I think that will be all. I again would like to thank you, the moderator, Melanie, Slade from IEA, and the 4 great speakers, Neha from CLASP, Hafiza from Malaysia, Rizky from ASEAN Center for Energy, and also Madeleine from UNEP. I wish you have a good day. I wish you to have a great insight from today's discussions. And last but not least, I would like to wish you a very great day. Enjoy weekend, stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.